This is going to be a quick tutorial on the reshaping of a geometric shape to start your mesh process. What we're going to start out with is our source image on the bottom, layer 1, and we're going to create a new layer on top, which is going to be layer 2, and we'll name this art for now. And we're going to start reshaping, and this is pretty simple. Whenever I do, I always start out using a square. Very rarely do I use any other shape. Now in this case we can work in the beginning as the preview is on. You can see that right here, but I'm just going to turn it off anyway. So now the wireframe, or I should say any work we put on top, is in wireframe mode. So to start off, I'm going to look at the best position of where this square has to go, and I'm not going to go to the bottom. I'm going to start right about where the curve of the bottle starts to taper in and pull up and to the top right, so I can cover the bottle where it meets the sheathing of the cap and the right side. If it's slightly off, we can adjust that, and we'll zoom in a little just to make sure it's on or about right, and it is. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do here, and you can do this manually, but I tend to do it in shapes that are symmetrical like this. I'll use the Object Warp Distortion tool. So I'm going to go up to Object, Envelope Distort, and Make with Warp. In this particular case, I'm going to use a arch. I'm going to have everything on 0, and I'm going to use a vertical distortion. And you can see from the preview, it's just a very simple segmented square now, and these can be repositioned like any work can. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to shape the bottle contour using this. Now this is so easy, again, because it's symmetrical. I just need to use my direct selection tool, select the top 2 nodes, and I'm going to resize, dragging from somewhere to from the outer left towards the center, and hold down Shift to constrain. You can see it almost takes on the shape of the bottle. And now the bottle is slightly, the photograph of the bottle is slightly distorted, which is the problem with photography. It always lies. There's always distortion in keystoning. Keystoning is the depth from the center of the lens to the outermost corners. So that distance on a photograph is longer than the dead center. So you get a distortion. It's why photographs of you on iPhones and things like that, your legs always look very short. So now we can do a little more manual distortion or manual shaping. I'm just going to, pull this side in a little just to match up the top a little better, and it's good enough for now because, again, the bottle is distorted. So now we have this, and we can start adding our mesh. But I'm going to be very careful, because if I add too many lines, when I go to reshape this bottom, I'm going to have too much to do. So I'm only going to put a few to start. To start, I'm going to select the mesh. I'm going to get my mesh tool, and I'm going to click where I think the center is. Now I have my center vertical mesh line. Now I'm going to choose very few critical points where I see this dark highlight. I'm going to select right on that, and I'm going to need one very close to that on both sides so I can get this nice sharp highlight. And I'm going to do the same with the other side, about the same distance. Then I'm just going to simply put one in the center. And that's all I'm going to do to start my mesh before I rework this bottom. So let's zoom in on that bottom so we can fix it up. I'm going to move the layer palette out of the way, and I can come in with my direct selection tool so I can maneuver these points. And I'm going to select just the center ones, not the outer one, and I'm going to pull them to where they finally meet the bottom of the bottle. Do the same here, and do the same here. So you can see this is very wobbly right now, so we just have to make some corrections to that. Well, the first is this anchor point, this toggle right here, it has to be constrained down, so we're just going to constrain it down. And we're going to do the other one to about the same distance. Now this, we're going to pull straight up on these toggles. We're not going to shift them out like this or do anything crazy. We're just going to simply shift up until we get a nice curve. And then we'll do the same here. This one here is probably careful here. And I can see that I have to come down a little here, so I'm just selecting this one and this one with the direct selection. I'm going to use my arrow key just to pull it down more. So if I go to and hide my bottle right now, you can see I have a pretty good contour of the bottle here. It might not be perfect, but I can always come back and mask that in if I'm not totally satisfied. I can pull these nodes all outside the bottle and get a beautiful blend, and then come in with a perfect silhouette of the bottle and mask it, and everything will be perfect. But for this purpose, we're going to leave it as is. So let's go back to full view, and I'm going to add more of these wireframe verticals. Now, what I mentioned before, we have to be careful about where we add these because we want to make sure we can blend this properly. You can see there's a sharp edge to the highlighting here, or the colors in here and here. So when that happens, you need a mesh line on both sides. So I can see the outside starts dark, has a very sharp edge right here. So I'm going to highlight the mesh and I'm going to start putting them in. I'm going to put one in where I think it's going to go dark and where I need it to go light. Same here. I'm going to put one right about there. Here I'm going to leave this blend, but I'm going to put one here and here. That one's going to be fine, but I'm going to need to put one here and here, here and here, there and there. So if I click off and show you just the wireframe, you can see any one of these very close together mesh verticals, that's going to be where it's going to become a slightly sharper color change. So we can turn that back on. And now let's just go to full view, and we're going to put in some of the horizontal blends now. Well, looking at this, I can see that there's some coloration right in here from the photography that I'm probably going to correct. So I still want a horizontal line right about there. Still want one right about there. And I want one just above where this label is, because when I mesh it, I'm going to mesh the color straight through. What does that mean? It means when I select these points right here, I'm going to choose the color from up here, or wherever I think up here would give me a nice clean look. And to do that, when I mesh them, I'm going to drag select them in wireframe and eyedropper the color from right there, and that'll give the exact color straight down. So for now, I'm going to continue the mesh, and you can see it's going to start to bend here because I have bends on the bottom now, so it's going to start working that way for me. And it gives you a nice wireframe similar to what a 3D program would do. And I'll probably put one more right here. Now, as I go and I need more mesh, I can always add lines or subtract. But for now, and to see how the mesh works and how you can reshape it, you can see I have a nice, clean verticals that didn't become all bent and steer towards the outside because I did not bend this bottom of the bottle first. I did that afterwards, and that keeps these verticals straight. Otherwise, you would have seen the kind of distortion you see here, but it would have been an unwelcome distortion vertically. The lines would have come down and bent onto the outside, and that's not what we were looking for. So that's how you distort the mesh and create the initial mesh. But it's not something you can colorize yet. If I go to colorize this, if I select a point right there, and you can see this is all white, and I choose a color, and that color I choose is red, you can see it's not changing my preview. So what needs to happen first is you're going to select the mesh, go to Objects, Envelope Distort, and Release. And that's going to give you a square shape and your mesh. This piece, you delete. This piece, and you can see, now I can start to colorize that. But we're not going to colorize it this way. We're going to colorize it utilizing the image underneath. So how do I do that? Very simply, I always colorize my mesh to white first. Because in my preview, as I'm moving along, I can see the colors changing. And even though it's very small, you'll be able to see it right here. So we're going to go to wireframe, and I'm going to zoom in so we can get a good sense of this as it goes along. What you're going to do, and I always select my direct cursor and then my eyedropper, but come back to my direct cursor. It's just a OCD thing I have. So I'm going to select that node, but now I want to eyedropper it. back to that color. So by having this in wireframe, the art layer, when I select with my eyedropper, it's going to pull that color up. And I just saw a little dot show up here. And that means it's starting to drop in color. So now I'm going to come over and I'm going to hold my control so I can change it back to my direct selection. I'm going to select the next node and I'm going to hit the eyedropper after releasing the control key. So the process here is control key, select, release control key, eyedropper. Control key, select, release control key, eyedropper. Now if I go to my preview mode, you can see I'm eyedroppering, pulling the color into those nodes. So let's go back up to wireframe, and I'm going to now go through this process. And if you're slightly off on some of these selections of eyedropper the color, don't panic. You can always go back and refill it with the proper color. And sometimes when these nodes are very close together, they're hard to select the next one. So I just jump down to a completely different node, and then I can come back and select that other node. And let's go back to, you can see now I'm pulling in a lot more color. Again, back to my wireframe for the art layer. And just make sure. And as I'm selecting, watch right down here. As I'm selecting, I'll see if I selected a white node, and then I can see that I've properly chosen the right color. So that's another way of making sure that you're moving along, doing the right things. Now up here, all of these, I'm going to actually pull the color down from underneath these nodes. Now some of these are so close together up here, I'm going to need to really zoom in. I'll move this out of the way. You can see when I select them, that one has color, that one does not. So now I'm going to select the color from right here. Okay, that one has color, that one does not. And I'll do the same here. I'll select the color from the nodes, or I should say the source image further down, because there's bubbles here that right now I don't want to try to capture the color in. So let's just make sure we have all of those colorized. I think over here, same thing. Now over here I have another dilemma, the colors in here. So I'm just going to make sure I get the colors that I need. Okay. It's not perfect, but if I go to artwork mode, you can see that the color is really coming in. There's one node here missing, so we're just going to come in, select that node, whichever one it is. It's probably the next one. There it is, and we're going to eyedropper that color. So I can go back out, click off, go to preview mode, and you can see this is really becoming beautiful, very much like the original bottle. I turn it on and off. Now there's work and layers that we'll put on top of this for highlights, but that is in essence how you're going to eyedropper the color in to your wireframe which you created. Thank you.